What healing is becoming more whole. That when the first life form appeared on Earth, let's imagine that it's a single cell. That cell had a membrane. And in order to be alive, that membrane had to be intact so that the cell could establish an internal balance, the right number of potassium ions and sodium ions and foods, and it had to get rid of its waste products. If that balance is thrown off, then the cell becomes ill in some way, and if that illness proceeds, then that cell can die. If the membrane of the cell therefore becomes dysfunctional, let's say there's a hole in the membrane, then the cell has to close that hole. It has to remain a total, complete organism. In other words, it has to have an identity, and number two, it has to establish an internal balance. And this is what life requires, but that's what healing requires too, because if the balance is thrown off, then we must reestablish the integrity and we must reestablish the balance. Life is about that. Healing is about that. And as we talk about multicellular animals, and as we talk about animals that live in families and communities, the notion of wholeness takes on other meanings, other definitions, because now we're talking about the wholeness of the mother and the child, the wholeness of the family, the wholeness of the beehive. And so healing is managing to create wholeness. And there's an individual, there's a level of wholeness of an individual cell of my body. There's a wholeness of an organ of the body. There's a wholeness of the organ system of the body. There's a wholeness of the body as a whole. But me, I'm not just a body. I have a mind. I have emotions. I have a sense of spirituality. I have my behaviors. I have my relationships with other people. When I bring wholeness to all those levels, then I am more whole and more healed. So people often think of healing somehow as getting the pain to go away. Well, an aspirin may get the pain to go away. It'll treat the source. And that's what I found we were doing mostly in Western medicine. We are treating the symptoms rather than the source of whatever the illness is. And so if a person comes in and let's say they're vomiting blood from the mouth, well, we could say, okay, let's see if we can stuff some bandages in their mouth to stop the bleeding. That's not a good idea. Instead, we look and we say, oh, it's coming from the stomach. We take an x-ray, we say, there's an ulcer. Okay, so let's get in there and cut that ulcer out. Well, wait a minute, why is there an ulcer? Well, the ulcer is in there. You take a history of the person and you find out the ulcer is just a symptom, because the person's been drinking a fifth of gin and eating about 30 aspirin a day. That's much closer to the source. But is that the source? No, maybe that. Why are you doing that? Well, it turns out the person's suffering from some deep guilt. And that guilt is causing them to feel very bad, and so they drink, and that takes care of the bad feelings, but then they have hangovers, and then they take the aspirin. So the ulcer is a symptom, but the behavior is a symptom too. A symptom of an imbalance at the mental, emotional, spiritual, and relationship level. So when I talk about healing, I'm looking at all those different levels.